So the goal of my session here today is we're going to look at how we can use Claris Connect with a number of different Amazon Web Services. And we're going to kind of go into detail, sort of maybe some specific use cases with these AWS services that you'd have. And I've pre-recorded a number of demos as well here. So the goal I'm hoping for you to take away from this is if you have minimal experience with AWS or Claris Connect, that this maybe gives you a little bit of a push in a direction to go further and try some more. I think they're both pretty compelling technology platforms that can complement each other really well. Then a little bit about me. So my name's Matt Hintz. I'm a senior application developer with Salant Consulting. I've been a FileMaker developer for over 13 years. I'm also a AWS Solutions Architect associate level. I just recertified in that at the beginning of this year. I'm the proud father of two kids, Jack and Sophia. Jack's 5 and Sophia is 3. My wife Rachel's with them right now, and when I get back on Monday, we're moving to a new house. So I try to make this a very interesting February for us. I also have a dog named Zeppelin. He's a 120-pound Bernese Mountain Dog, and I would say my life companion. So it's pretty cool. I was born and raised in Wisconsin, never thought to leave, so I'm a diehard Wisconsin sports fan, Bucks, Packers, Brewers. Then when my son was born, I got into European soccer and the English Premier League, so I'm now a Tottenham Hotspur fan. So that's something I never thought I'd be, but go ahead. All right, so I want to start take a step back and kind of give you some background on sort of how this presentation came to be, as well as some of the other things we've created from this. So we have a small subcommittee at Salant. It's called Argos. It's pretty small. It's 4 people. Somewhat of sometimes a rotating cast. Actually, 2 of them are here. Renata and Anders, you guys want to stand up, maybe? There's one. Renata left. Scared her off. All right. And so Marcelo is a technical solutions architect that's Salant. He heads up the committee, and the subcommittee started as sort of like trying to develop an internal logging tool we could use within FileMaker, and it kind of quickly shifted because we thought, well, maybe you want to try some different things and go in different directions, and so we moved on, and now our focus is basically trying to, explore new technology and develop new skills and kind of get out of our comfort zone every once in a while. So one of the things that we decided to look into was, a lot of us personally did not have experience with Connect. And we wanted to have some real world experience, try with some actual API services and see what we could put together. So we kind of looked into and did a bunch of searching out there and tried to figure out what's out there, who's tried this, who's done these sorts of things, and we felt like there was a pretty good gap in related to connecting Amazon Web Services with Claris Connect. So that came out to be about 7 blog posts where we talked about, in some level, integrating Amazon Web Services with Claris Connect, but then it was also taking Claris Connect further. Essentially, this presentation is a distillation of about 7 blog posts. So there's a lot to cover, but I think it's a good kind of primer here. Does anyone, and Anders knows, but does anyone know where Argo comes from, or Argos? The ship? Yeah, the ship. So this is I didn't know this, but other people told me it's the ship that Jason the Argonauts take to retrieve the Golden Fleece in Greek mythology, is my understanding. So that's why this is called a journey of discovery, is that we're trying to essentially find new things, try stuff they haven't done before, and explore new horizons or something like that. Show of hands, how many of you have used Claris Connect or have or use it in a production environment in some capacity? Great, awesome. So for those that may not be familiar, Claris Connect is an API orchestration software service. It's web-based, and its goal is to simplify and assist in integrating various APIs. And so with Claris Connect, there's a couple things you have to kind of know beforehand. Claris Connect requires setting up a Claris ID, which I would imagine most of us probably have at this point. But essentially creating that account is essentially like an Apple ID. It's a unique identifier that you can use within their Claris Connect universe. And let's get a little bit of language or terminology down with Claris Connect here as well. So the way Claris Connect is organized is you have projects, and projects are essentially a collection of workflows or flows, as they're called. And each flow is made up of a trigger, and then the subsequent actions that occurred from that trigger. So that's kind of our basic outline of what Claris Connect is doing. Is we're taking a collection of different flows that may integrate multiple different APIs in different ways, and kind of grouping them together for us to use. Another thing that I think is sometimes overlooked with Claris Connect, but Claris Connect can be a pretty useful and low-cost webhook service. So has anyone had experience using webhooks before? Imagine, yeah, great. So webhooks are really great. The really nice thing about them is they're event-driven. So the idea is that something occurs and that triggers a process to send a call to another API. And then as that event is pushed, that application takes in that data and then processes it in some way. And this can be done a number of things. It could just be simple things like querying data, running a script, doing your normal CRUD, create, update, deleting records, those sorts of things. Or so webhooks is another feature, and included in the resources at the end here. Wim DeCourt from Slang, he had a blog post about this a few years back about webhooks that would be another great resource to look into that gives you more details on that as well. One new thing that Claris Connect announced fairly recently was the availability to use custom connectors. It's kind of exciting in a way because as we'll see as we go through some of this, Claris has a pretty large library of connectors available for you, but it's not everything. And sometimes there's edge cases where maybe there's a service that isn't yet in there. And so being able to make a custom connector, they're JSON formatted, so it's something most of us are used to working in at this point. And it essentially should support most REST APIs. There's some caveats in terms of login and authorization, but that's kind of where kind of the next exciting thing that they're working on there with custom connectors. So I'll stop talking for a little bit and we'll kind of show a little bit of a demo here. I'm just going to go through Claris Connect and setting it up and everything. So I'll give one sec here. And I'll need to turn that down. All right, so for those that aren't familiar, this is Claris Connect. This is what you see after you log in, after you create your account. There is a free tier available that gives you up to 500 flow calls for free in a month. And from here, we see all of our different projects. And then below each project, you'll see the specific connectors that are being used. So it's a good example of kind of what you might see here. And so from here, you can easily create new projects or create new flows within a given project. Up at the top, we also have what we just talked about, custom connectors. Those are available from here. And then there are a number of templates that are available. So those allow you to use some pre-configured connectors that integrate with each other fairly easily. So here we're seeing an example of a flow. You can see the first thing that occurs here is what we call the trigger. In this case, this trigger is coming from a FileMaker script running on a FileMaker server here. And so the nice thing about this is it's Claris Connect integrates really, really well with the existing FileMaker platform. So there's a built-in script step now. I think it was FileMaker 20 that included that. That instead of having to do our previous insert from URL calls, we can now do it with one single line command. And that kind of simplifies it as well. So that gives us a little for there. So once that data is sent then to Claris Connect through that triggering script, that data is taken in, and in this quick demo example, you're able to then parse out that data. If you click on the right here, there's that little plus button off to the side. And that will allow you to choose the specific data that's in the JSON format that you want to fill in certain fields from there. So and then again, we taking a quick look here with custom connectors. The interesting thing right now that I'm experiencing with custom connectors is once you kind of finish the custom connector and publish it, you can't really modify it. There's not like a revision kind of control thing. So the way we've been doing is just creating separate ones with different versionings, but that I would imagine that might change at some point. One of the APIs that we worked with the most that was for a custom connector was the Smarty Streets API. So this is what the custom connector looks like. And I'll show it in a little bit. There's a specific schema that Claris Connect is looking for, and there's certain components of this that are required. And so this particular connector that we were trying out was one that was obviously not part of Claris Connect. And what it does is allow you to send an address to it, and then it responds back if it's a valid U.S. address, or international as well. So that gives you a little bit on just a little bit of that. And then here you can take a quick look with this. So this kind of this is the documentation. This is obviously at help.claris.com. And this gives you an idea of sort of the details of each piece of the schema and what information needs to go into there. So this is pretty extensive. It's, at least in my experience, it takes a while to kind of build it correctly and test it out. But you can kind of see there's a lot of options, different types of ways to authorize access are built into that. So and then the other nice thing too is it works just like other Claris connectors in that you have to set up like a test connection, and we'll see that in a little bit in my next demo. But this is kind of the magic sauce with Claris Connect is you can take those these APIs, integrate them, and it'll force you to run some tests and connect those services and make sure they work before it'll actually allow you to save the flows in place. So it does a pretty good job of ensuring you've got everything you need. So one of the things you have to do is have a test URL with your schema, and having that test URL basically allows Claris Connect to test out that connection. So that's what we set at the bottom there. So it gives you an idea. So that's Claris Connect. Obviously, probably familiar to some of you, but thought I'd start from square one. And can back over here. Here. All right. Amazon Web Services. I would imagine most people know about them at this point. Anyone currently using Amazon Web Services as well? All right, cool. All right, makes sense. I can see why you guys are here. So Amazon Web Services started in March 2006, and it's got a pretty interesting backstory, at least to me. As Amazon was growing and scaling and becoming the behemoth they are now, they really ran into a scalability problem and how to maintain and have a global infrastructure and be able to have their services, their websites, and all the things that they offer available throughout the world. And they essentially sort of saw a new market. And I think they were kind of a leader in the cloud. And I'm not sure the exact numbers, but they're by far the largest cloud provider currently. And AWS is vast. It is massive. There's over 200 services, products. And then on top of that, there's also an AWS marketplace where companies can create their own solutions and sell them and kind of make pre-built servers and other kind of services through that. So again, just to illustrate a little bit, AWS has a global infrastructure, and most cloud providers do to some extent, right? But you can see it's pretty diverse. It's all over the place, and within each within each of these geographical regions, there's also then availability zones within there. And so the neat thing with these geographical regions is each geographical region has multiple sites, multiple locations where your instances, your servers, and other services are running. And so if there's a problem with one availability zone in a geographical location, you can roll over and go over to a different availability zone fairly easily with some automated services. The big reason why it matters to be global and to have a global infrastructure is it has to do with latency. It has to do with the distance that data has to travel through a wire, right? And so you want to have your users be as close as possible to your given servers. Sometimes there's governmental reasons too as well where it needs to be. But essentially, this kind of gives you a way to, if you're as a FileMaker developer, gives you a way to have a global footprint and have your services available all over. So with Amazon Web Services, similar, they have a free option to get started. To start, you really just need a couple of info, or your email address, your phone number, and then you have a credit card to set up the account. When you start off, there's not necessarily going to be a huge amount of fees, but as you start to use services, we'll talk a little bit about some of the options you have when it comes to costs and managing those costs in there as well. So similar to Claris Connect, Amazon has a lot of free options available to it, and they have pretty high limits. I think the ones that stand out to me the most here, Amazon SNS, which is one we'll talk about. You can do up to 1 million messages through push messages through that. It's under that, it's free. So there's a number of these options available, and it gives you a good way to kind of get into the ecosystem and try things out. There's also some too, like Amazon's S3 service, which we'll talk about it a little bit too. That service also has sort of a 12-month trial free period essentially, and you get about 5 gigs of storage for that. So then after that, then there's some charge involved with that. So I'm just going to show the Amazon Web Console really quick here, and one of the first things that Amazon recommends that you do, AWS recommends that you do, is secure your root user account. So the first account that gets made is the root user, and one of the first things that they recommend to do is set up multi-factor, 2-factor authentication on that account. And I would say in general, you probably want to enable it on most of your accounts that have access to AWS. So let's just take a look at that. It's pretty simple.
In this demo, we're going to review the Amazon Web Services.
So this is what you see when you log into Amazon Web Services. It's the console main page, and most of my
Amazon.com/free
navigation, time I spent in here, I go to the search menu in the upper left there, and I search for the service that I want to access. Obviously, your recently visited services are there. There's also some details about upcoming costs. This is kind of one of the things that AWS does a pretty good job of, is showing you your potential costs that are coming up, as well as that
called IAM, which
as well as what they think currently how much you spent that month. So the first area we'll get familiar with is the Identity and Access Management, or IAM.
So after we've created our account, the first thing we're going to do is
this is essentially where you create your user accounts, your groups that provides all your access to your different services.
And as you can see,
so as of right now, we only have really one user. That one user is the root account, so we're going to add a 2-factor authentication here.
Google Authenticator.
There's a number of different ways you can do it. Probably the most common way these days is using an authenticator app of some kind, Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator. But you can also use different hardware security keys as well.
Then what we're first going to do is launch our compatible application.
So most of us are probably familiar with this. Usually got to scan a QR code.
I'm going to type in the secret key,
set up the authentication, and then there's sequences of 6-digit keys in most cases. And so once you set those up, and you confirm that you've got the right sequence, it'll show there as a
now when I log into my AWS account, it will ask.
You can have multiple, and you can also disable and revoke, and also try to
remove a device,
renew or reset the sequence keys if you somehow become misaligned with them. So this is obviously a pretty basic first step, but this would be an example of probably something you want to do right away when you get into Amazon Web Services. The other part of that too, probably worth mentioning, is we're going to see in these next demos too. We're not going to use this root account for any of the stuff we're going to demo from this point on. The root account is generally, like with most computer systems, you don't want to be in the full access or full account like that can kind of do anything. So that's something I want to keep in mind here as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about maybe some specific services within Amazon's Web Services. The first one we're going to look at is Amazon's SNS, or Simple Notification Service. And this is a pretty neat tool. It allows you to basically do app-to-app communication as well as app-to-user communication. And it can go through a number of different methods. You can do it through email. You can do it through text messages in over 240 countries, and you can also do mobile push notifications on iOS and Android as well. So it provides you a pretty robust tool, and the way that you set up SNS is you create what are called topics, and then you can send requests for people to subscribe to that topic, and then they will get those emails as a part of that regular thing. So we've used this service for like error log reporting on some services. You can also use it for as a way to, like I said, sending text messages to your users. So it's a pretty robust solution, and it can be an alternative to the old way of sending SMTP. It can be kind of an alternative here in that you can essentially publish a message to SNS, and then SNS takes that message and then distributes it through your topic and then to the different users that would get it. It also has a dead letter queue, so if the end user is not able to receive it, emails down, or there's something else didn't work, it will basically grab those lost message or those non-deliverable messages, and you can review them later. Beyond just getting the messages, just sending a message through those ways, you can also use SNS as a way to trigger other services within Amazon Web Services. So you can take different services like Amazon or AWS Lambda, which is a serverless compute capability. So there's a lot of different options there, and it's a really well integrated solution for Amazon Web Services. So here's just another example of text messages going through here. So this will be kind of another little demo we'll do here, and we'll kind of show how we can.
Okay, this.
All right. So again, we're back in our old starting point here at Amazon's Web Console.
In this example, we're going
and we're going to go to the same place we went before. We're going to go to IAM.
First step we need to take
and we're going to set up a new user and a couple of groups here.
A group for this specific access that we're setting up. So I'm going to go over to my services up here at the top, and I'm going to search for IAM.
So again, I'm pulling up IAM, and then
in theory, you could
take a look. So I've done some previous users I've created, some other groups I've made before. So I can see there's an existing user group here. I think most of us would be familiar with the term of a group. It's essentially a collection of users.
We'll call this Claris.
Often when those users in that group then will also inherit the permissions and traits that are associated with that group. So this is a quick way to be able to give and revoke access to different services if you need to. So essentially I'm going to be making a slight typo on the top there. It's going to be SNS in a sec here. But essentially you have to attach a policy to these groups, or optionally you can. And so the nice thing with Amazon's Web Services, they have basically pre-built permission templates for different services.
So I'm going to search,
and you can easily search for them if I type the right one in.
Full access. So this policy basically,
and you'll see right here we have the SNS full access. So they're JSON-based documents essentially, and you're able to specify specific access, and you can see the full access one was fairly simple. There were some wildcards in there. Go back a little bit. So pretty straightforward. There's not much here. It's just basically you have your statement array, and then there's some objects in here that tell you what actions they're allowed to do within this policy. You have an effect of either allowing or denying from there. So this is obviously in this case, Claris Connect, for you to be able to use Claris Connect with a lot of these services, Claris Connect needs a full access account. But be aware that if you wanted to, you could create a custom connector and have it be not using this full access account. You could have it use just give them the ability to send emails, or just give them the ability to send messages, and basically make it more customizable from there. But you'll at least see there's some familiar things we might see as if we're FileMaker developers here.
And now I can create the group. So now I've created.
All right, so I've created my group. Called it Claris Connect SNS Access, and no one's in it yet. But I'm going to add a user that I've already created down here for this use, this SNS Connect user. So this is the user that I'm going to use within with Claris Connect.
So now
and
this
that
particular
will
user is in this group,
allow
and
me
then
to
they
then
inherit the
to access
permissions and
Claris Connect
access
through this
from this
service.
policy that they have assigned to them in this group. So now this makes it easy then for us to add or remove people.
So this is a
privilege
pretty
set
common
that we
way
can create,
with any kind of
to
AWS
access
service, how
key.
you would set up
It's
access
also under security
and
credentials.
make credentials
and
for it as well.
create an access key down there,
And
we can see
the way
that
then that
right here.
we set up these users
So
is we set up what's called an access key, which might be familiar to some of you with some other API services that you've used.
So let's create an access
And so
key.
essentially we create an access key here, and it's going to have a long access key, and then there's also a shared
so one
secret.
thing I want you to do is avoid using
And essentially, once you get past this setup and you complete this phase, you'll get to the next screen, and that's the last time you'll be able to see the shared secret. So make note of it, store it in a secure place like a password manager maybe, or under your keyboard.
To be able to complete this.
But essentially, you can see here we have the access key, and then the right is our shared secret that we use.
Off screen.
So that's kind of the basic of just getting this set up on Amazon Web Services side of just setting up the access.
In Claris Connect, one of the steps that it's going to
a little
ask
bit of that, and I
is
think
for
that's all I
the
have.
access key.
Yeah, and then we can see the access key down there. So that gives us a glimpse into SNS, obviously really quick, just kind of run through some stuff here, but maybe let's talk about a couple other services that are available. So the three of the ones that we're talking about today are current connectors within Claris Connect. I would probably say this is probably the most commonly used Amazon Web Service. Any of you currently using Amazon S3? Yeah. It's a pretty great way to store large amounts of data at a very low cost. It's not exactly like a network share or a network volume. It's more of this idea of an object storage model. So instead of sort of setting up a OS level volume and formatting for a certain operating system and storing your data on there, S3 is different in that you're kind of you can still have somewhat of a file system in different folder structures, but the idea is that it's focused on storing objects in a certain format. Because of that, then Amazon S3 is highly available, highly scalable, and you'll see when you look at some of the pricing here, it's for how much storage you get and the access that it gives you to that data. It's very cost effective. Like I mentioned, they have a free tier for the first 12 months, and you get up to 5 gigs of storage for free in that 12-month period. So great way to get your feet wet and jump in and try it out. So there's some. In terms of the basic S3, your standard S3 storage, there's multiple storage tiers within Amazon's S3 service, and depending on what your data needs are. So if you need data that is regularly accessed, the standard standard S3 is a starting point. So for example, to give you a cost idea with that, so for the first 50 terabytes that you store in Amazon S3, you pay $0.023 per gigabyte. So it's incredibly cost effective. I think I did the math at one point. I wrote it down somewhere here. You can have 50 gigabytes for very small, like $10 a month, even lower maybe. So it's incredibly cost effective. And the other thing too is that S3 is globally available. So whatever Amazon region you're closest to, you can access that data. And so this can be a very useful way to integrate FileMaker with it. It allows you to take maybe some of that container data that you've kept in FileMaker, and you can move it into this S3 architecture and make it available beyond just your regular container fields and for other services. So there are, depending on what data you're loading in your use case, there are different types of storage classes, like I kind of mentioned earlier. So starting on the left is sort of the general purpose one, and then as you kind of move forward, you start going into standard and frequent access. That's IA and frequent access, and then you have intelligent tiering, and that's probably the one I think most people would go with, because essentially S3 manages and watches the files that you've put in S3 and determines whether or not they're being accessed at a regular interval, and can kind of move them over to a different to kind of a different storage method that's less expensive. Then as you go further down the line, you start moving into like Amazon Glacier, and the idea being that this is just meant to be your long-term archive. It's not necessarily something that you're trying to access every day. There's specific things like for your minimum storage duration is 30 days for it to stay. It has to stay within there for 30 days. And you also see where did it go? So there's also the latency of getting that data. So from the left side, you're getting millisecond response time for the first bytes with your latency, and then as you go further to the right, it becomes slower and slower, at least on the way far end of it. And again, the durability is across the board is the same. S3's replicated beyond belief, so that data is pretty safe. But I also wouldn't say it should be your only store of data. Data that exists in one place doesn't really exist, in my opinion. So you have to have a couple different options. So maybe some use cases I would think about with how we use Amazon S3. I'd be interested to see how other people are using it. One common way I've seen is clients that maybe don't use other Amazon Web Services. They'll use it as a kind of an offsite backup. They'll take their FileMaker backups or other information they want to keep, and they use Amazon's S3 service to upload that data. You can also then integrate with their APIs. We haven't really dug beyond just kind of the basics here, but at least in my experience, most of the Amazon Web Service APIs that I've worked with are incredibly robust. They have a lot of availability, and it goes kind of beyond what we do with Claris Connect. But in theory, you could integrate a method to take your FileMaker nightly backups and upload them to S3 and integrate that using an API. It kind of automates that for you. So there's a lot. That's the one use case. I did mention too. I've used Amazon S3 as a way to kind of move really large record sets out of FileMaker's container model. There's not necessarily fundamentally wrong with that model, but when you look at costs in Amazon Web Services, the cost to have a volume attached to your EC2 instance is more expensive than putting that data in S3. So if you have such a large amount of data that's in your FileMaker containers, S3 can be an alternative to store that data and still be able to access it, but at a much lower cost. One client I had, we had a lot of trouble uploading images remotely, and we found that instead of trying to upload images directly through FileMaker, we actually would upload them up to S3, put them in a directory, and then mark the record and where it's stored. And then once it came over to the FileMaker side, that data then gets processed, and then it downloads that image when the user needs it, essentially. So it provides another way to kind of be able to upload your data and not be constrained maybe by your server. Another way we've used this a lot as well is we've taken like a client portal where they can log in and view quotes and proposals. And we then we basically use FileMaker to make the PDF. FileMaker sends that PDF to S3, and then the web service is sent a pre-shared URL link to that S3 object, and the web service then downloads that and displays it in the web browser. So there's a number of ways you can use this. It's a pretty powerful and flexible tool, pretty low cost too. I was going to have a demo for this, but I ran into some technical issues, and so I had to last second kind of decide to cut it. But I was running into some authentication issues with S3. Or no demo for this part, but I kind of get the gist of it here. So, all right. So another service that we tried out and wrote some blog posts on was related to using Claris Connect with Amazon's SES. You'll find there's a lot of these acronyms like this, and part of working in AWS is just understanding the differences between the services and what they stand for, and figuring out what service works best and is most cost effective for your client. So in this case, the simple email service is just that. It's a pretty low cost way to send mass emails if you have maybe some marketing emails or other kind of regularly sent emails. It also, so it's not only sending of emails, but it can also receive. The built-in connector in Amazon's in Claris Connect only does sending mail, doesn't do any retrieval, but obviously with a custom connector, you could go further with that. It also supports for some newer things, newer protocols and technologies from a security standpoint. So it supports DMARC, and that's an email authentication protocol. And essentially, the goal of using DMARC is so that your domain cannot be used for email spoofing, because you're basically signing off and authorizing, securely signing the messages as they're sent out. So it helps kind of protect against that. In the example I'll show, I don't actually go as far enough to try to set up DMARC or DKIM, but these are probably things as a best practice I would recommend if you do want to use SES is to you're going to need to be able to fully, I think, utilize safely SES. You'll want to be able to make sure that you have control over your DNS servers, because you'll have to put in some CNAME records in your DNS to prove and validate that you have control over that domain and that email service. SES is also obviously very cost effective. If you're sending an email from a server that's is in Amazon, an EC2 instance, it's 10 cents for every 1,000 emails you send. So pretty cost effective, and inbound emails are similarly priced. And then beyond that, there are some charges that have to do with how much data is being sent in those emails. But even then, the costs are incredibly low. It's 12 cents per gigabyte that you send in those messages. So as long as you're not sending incredibly complex HTML or something beyond that in your emails, it's a very negligible cost at that point. So that's Amazon's SES, and this was the blog post that I actually wrote, had to do with SES, and this I kind of saw as when we were kind of struggling with sending SMTP through FileMaker because of changes to Google and Amazon. This kind of came as a way of like, oh, this might be a quick, easy way to be able to replace, sending it as SMTP. So I've used it for that. Like I said, I think we also use it for some of our marketing emails at Soliant. So it's a useful tool, and like I said, low cost. So let me kind of go through. So this demo is a little bit longer. This is going to cover. We're going to go over the initial. Let's keep coming back. Sorry about that. One sec.
In this demonstration.
All right, so we're kind of in a familiar place. We're Amazon Web Services again. We're in the console. We're specifically in SES. So one of the first things that you need to do after you've set up SES is you need to verify your identities. And there's essentially two ways to verify your email identities. The simple, basic way that can be a good way to test this service and try it out is to essentially set up and authorize a single email account. So there's a setup procedure here you can see. So the first thing you can do is you can verify your emails, and then you can start sending test emails to those addresses. When you set up SES initially, you're in essentially what's called sandbox mode. So you can only send messages to emails that are listed here in this list when you're in sandbox mode. To be able to go into live production and to be able to actually send it out fully, you're going to want to have DMARC and DKIM set up, and then you're also going to you're also going to then want to what was the other thing? There's one other thing. But yeah, you also want to then, instead of using email addresses specifically, you want to actually set up a full domain. So you can see there's our two options. And then here as well, you can see this is where you would set up your DKIM. And then at the bottom here, there's some DNS records. So these would be the DNS records that you then put into your DNS server so that you can basically verify and validate that you have control over that domain. So it gives us a little bit of overview there. And similarly, we're going to create another group in this case, and that group will be specifically for this access. So, this is not S3, SES, yeah. So again, we will select our so we select, in this case, again, it's full access account. We'll select that. And now we have our group. And again, we repeat the process. We add our user to it. In this case, I'm actually just going to create a whole new user for this purpose. And again, those permissions are inherited just by adding them to that group, essentially. So. All right, so again, here, then this is where we're setting up our access keys again. And we accept that up. All right, so now I've hopped over over to Claris Connect here. And so I'm going to start by creating a new flow. And I'm going to trigger it the same way. You can see there's some that are grayed out here. So there's only certain connectors or actions that are available as a trigger. In this case, I'm just using our FileMaker script step to trigger this process. So this is going to trigger the sending of an email through SES. So I just follow those steps. I create a script. I use the trigger Claris Connect flow, copy this URL. I put the data that I want over here in my script. So in this case, I'm basically passing 4 things through this as a parameter over to Claris Connect. So this information is available in the documentation that Claris Connect has of what things need to be in there. So essentially the action is script, and then from down there, the message is what we send in that message, subject obviously, and then the destination I'm passing as a script parameter the user email address that's just on that screen right there. So once we, I don't think I have a screen share here, but all right, so now I'm going to save the trigger. I'm going to rename it. And we'll add another action after that. So now we can see a lot of ones that are grayed out before are now available because we're beyond the triggering stage. Now we're on to what actions do we want to do from that trigger. So here we can see Amazon's SES is there. I can search for it or search for other services. And you can see the supported configuration, the supported command is send email. And so on the right side, we have oops. So then on the next step after we verified that we can connect to Amazon SES for this service, we go into the region section. We set what region. So most Amazon Web Services run from a specific region in the world. So you get to choose that and determine that. So in this case, I think I'm using like one of the default ones. I think it's US East 2. It's in Northern Virginia. But essentially, I can go into these field the button on the right with the plus and the lines, and I can, whatever is passed from my script that triggers it, that data, that data is available here, and I'll get to that in just a sec. So I go back over here to show, I think so I'm going to click back into Amazon Web Services here so that I can show you sort of how you can determine what region you're in and what you set up. This is where you toggle and change regions in the upper right there. Sorry about that. And so here you can do other regions. I would recommend going to our blog post for this because you would think you could type in the region US East, US East to Ohio as another region, or say one of the ones that maybe aren't listed here. But it's a little different. You actually have to use the coded region name, the US-East-2. So it's a little of a hidden thing here, and that tripped us up for quite some time trying to figure out how can we use a different region and put it in correctly. So that's in our blog post as well. So this is then, now that I've verified I can connect to S3, this is when I start filling in. All right, that data that's come from Claris Connect, I'm gonna click on those, and then I can see all the information I'm sending. And this has all been triggered from that test that I ran, right? So whatever I pass in my parameters, it's going to show those things in that JSON object that I sent over. And I just simply go to each field that's required. And those are required fields from Amazon SES. And I can then choose the different parts of the different pieces that I need from here. You get the idea. So then you save your trigger, and now you basically, it's not enabled by default, so you do need to enable it. In a sec, we'll see kind of what, I'm going to run it again, and it's going to produce an OK message that it's sent. And then in a sec, I'm going to go back over to Claris Connect from FileMaker here. And I'm then going to look at one of the features within Claris Connect that's rather useful, and kind of the niche that they're looking for to work in here is not only is it providing this integration between this API and FileMaker, but it's also creating a log and a history of the times that you've ran this. And this is just built into it. You don't have to create your own logging or have in a system necessarily. that handles all this, I can go back to any specific call where this has occurred in the history, and I can rerun that exact same call that occurred. And I can then even dive deeper into the responses that I get back from each of these, from each service that's available there. So that I think is kind of that's the thing that really, for me, made me kind of go, oh, okay, this is a neat and powerful tool to be able to use for this. And you can see I've re-triggered another run here. And in a sec, once I reload it, it'll be complete, and you can see that ran again. So again, it's a great way to be able to test and configure your flows and ensure that they're operating properly for you. So, all right. So I know I threw a lot at you. There's a lot there in those demos. I want to kind of maybe just cover some last bits of details here and from there. So what are some big takeaways that I think I had and our team had from this? You kind of don't really realize, how valuable like having AWS or global infrastructure, having other servers all over the world, and having it at an incredibly cost-effective rate, having it be incredibly scalable. We didn't really talk too much about scalability, but one of I think the big things that sometimes is overlooked with Amazon's web services is their name for their servers are EC2, so they're elastic cloud compute. So the elastic is that your server that's running in the cloud, you're able to resize, adjust, add more memory, add more RAM, or make other changes, add new volumes, and you can improve and update an existing infrastructure and server that you have. With Claris Connect, I think the things that we ran into early on, not having the custom connectors, when we first started this, that wasn't around, and it was definitely something we were like, oh yeah, this would be really something we'd like to have at some point. So we're really excited that there's options for custom connectors out there now. The Smarty Streets is what we're working on. We're also trying to work on right now a Salesforce custom connector, and that's been challenging because Salesforce has some pretty complicated methods of getting into Salesforce and getting access to data within Salesforce. So, my takeaway from this, I really like the ability to have the flow history, be able to look back and when things have run through your integration here. And that's kind of, I think mostly I've seen, taking a step back to the challenge sometimes that can be when you're essentially trusting a third party to handle the transmission of this data, right? It's not your FileMaker server or your users in FileMaker communicating, say, directly to AWS. There is a middle piece in here. So as you add complexity into your integrations and as you add different connections, it gives you another possible point of failure. So Claris Connect could go down, AWS could go down. So as you want to try to minimize the amount of services you're trying to use within these, within your flows, just have additional possible points of failure. But having the flow history, I think is probably like the biggest thing for me is just having that built in and not having to create your own logging system for each API call is I think is pretty useful. I think that's pretty much mostly what I wanted to talk about today. I'd be open to if anyone's got any questions or if you want to talk afterwards, I'm available for that as well. But you guys made it, you survived. Time here, so yeah, great, thank you.